Pineville sat between a dark forest and a wide, quiet river, and most nights the town felt small enough to hold in one hand. The houses had old wooden porches, the roads were narrow, and the streetlights threw long gold lines across the wet pavement. People knew each other by name, and even the wind seemed to slow down when it passed through the town square. Sarah lived there with her younger brother, Ben, and she worked late at the town library where she kept maps, old town records, and her own careful dreams. She was a woman with brown hair, quick eyes, and a calm face that hid how much she worried about everyone around her. Ben was a boy with black hair, a bright smile, and a brave way of asking hard questions. He wanted to be strong like the heroes in the old books Sarah read to him, and he mattered because Sarah still believed she could protect someone, even when she could not protect herself. On the night the demons came, the danger was plain and simple. If Pineville fell, the people would be lost, the old forest would turn wild with fear, and the hidden thing under the town would wake fully and break the ground apart. Nobody in Pineville knew the whole truth, but one thing was already clear. Something terrible was sleeping under their feet, and somebody had already come to wake it. The raid began with fire. Black shapes rushed out of the trees, fast and silent, and then the town exploded into screams, smoke, and broken glass. Sarah ran through the square with Ben beside her while the sky filled with red light and falling ash. People scattered in every direction, some toward the church, some toward the river, and some into the woods, but the demons did not care where they ran. They clawed at doors, smashed carts, and drove people back from the main street with wild force. Sarah pulled Ben behind a broken wagon and saw the attackers clearly for the first time. Their eyes glowed like embers, and their armor looked made from old bones and dark metal. At their center stood Victor, a mercenary leader with gray hair, a sharp jaw, and a heavy black coat covered in silver clasps. He was not a demon, but he worked with them, and that made him worse in Sarah's eyes. Victor wanted the crown buried under Pineville because he believed it could control the sleeping god and turn that power into a weapon. He had sold his loyalty for power, and he believed the town was only a lock on a door he meant to open. Beside him moved Sharon, a woman with red hair and cold blue eyes who had once served the town guard before she betrayed them. She knew the secret paths beneath Pineville, and she wanted to be rich, safe, and gone before the town finished burning. That night, Sarah lost the world she knew. The library burned, the town hall cracked, and Ben with smoke rolled over Pineville like a dark blanket, and the town that once felt safe now looked broken and hollow. Fires still burned along the main street, and broken glass sparkled on the ground like cold stars. Sarah stood near the remains of the library with ash on her face, her eyes wide, her hands shaking, and her heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. She was a woman with brown hair, a young adult with a thin frame and a careful mind, and she had spent her whole life believing the town kept order because good people worked hard and did the right thing. Now she could see that belief cracking apart. Ben was beside her, a man with black hair and a strong build, and though he tried to stay calm, his face showed fear and anger in equal parts. He wanted to protect Sarah, protect the town, and keep anyone else from getting hurt, but he also understood that they were already standing inside a disaster. Victor had chosen this night to break Pineville open, and he wanted the sleeping god below the town because he believed that power would make him untouchable. Sharon, the woman with red hair and cold blue eyes, had betrayed the town guard long ago, and she cared only about money, safety, and escape. She had led Victor through the secret paths under Pineville because she believed she could leave before the damage reached her. That was the central danger now, plain and terrible. If Victor reached the sealed chamber below, he could turn that old power into a weapon, and if the seal failed, Pineville would lose far more than a few buildings. It would lose its future, its history, and maybe even the lives of everyone still trapped inside it. Sarah did not move at first because her mind still held the image of the library falling in flame. That building had been her world, her quiet place, and the one place where she felt close to her mother's old stories. Ben touched her arm and spoke in a low voice, telling her they had to move before Victor reached the old tunnel gate near the town hall. Sarah nodded, but she could barely hear him. Then she saw a shape moving through the smoke, and for one quick, terrible second she thought it was another enemy. Instead, it was Emily, a woman with blonde hair and a torn blue coat, the town clerk who had always hidden her fear behind strict rules and neat papers. Emily wanted to survive, but she also wanted to save the town records because she knew the oldest maps might show the secret routes below Pineville. She had never been brave in a loud way, but she was brave now, and she came running with a leather folder held tight to her chest. She told Sarah that the town hall vault had cracked open and that she had seen symbols on the inner stone walls that matched old notes in the archive. Those marks did not point to a prison, she said. They pointed to a lock. Sarah felt a chill run through her because that meant Pineville had not been built simply to live on top of the sleeping god. It had been built to hold the thing back on purpose. The town was not a random home. It was part of the seal. Ben looked toward the dark street and said they needed to warn anyone still alive, then reach the underground before Victor could use Sharon's roots. Emily agreed, and she led them through a narrow side lane where the smoke was thinner and the stones were still warm from the fire. The deeper they went, the more Pineville seemed to split into two towns. Above them, windows glowed with panic, and people shouted from broken doorways as they tried to gather children, elders, and whatever they could carry. Below them, under loose stones and warped boards, old tunnels waited in silence. Emily opened a rusted iron hatch behind a collapsed delivery shed, and cold air rose from the dark like a breath from another world. Ben went first, careful and alert, and Sarah followed with a lantern that flickered against wet stone. The tunnel walls were lined with old bricks and faded marks, and those marks matched the symbols Emily had shown them. Sarah noticed small carvings of hands, circles, and a single closed eye repeated again and again. Emily explained, in a voice that trembled only a little, that the town founders had written warnings in 3 places: the church records, the town archive, and the underground walls. They believed the sleeping god below Pineville was ancient, silent, and dangerous to wake. It was not evil in the simple sense, she said, but it was too large, too strange, and too powerful for any human will to control safely. Long ago, people had tried to use pieces of its energy to heal crops, power tools, and strengthen the town walls, and every time they reached too far, things went wrong. So the founders sealed it away and built Pineville above it, not as a prison for a monster, but as a warning to themselves. Sarah listened and felt something inside her turn over. She had spent years loving the town as a place of order and comfort, but now she understood that its order had always rested on fear and duty. That made Victor even more dangerous because he did not care about duty at all. He only cared about what he could take. A sharp sound echoed through the tunnel and all 3 of them froze. Voices came from ahead, then the scrape of boots on stone. Sharon appeared first, her red hair loose around her shoulders, her face pale in the lantern light, and her cold blue eyes fixed on the group like she was already counting what she might lose. Victor stood behind her, tall and hard-eyed, with a black coat marked by ash and dust, his expression calm in the way only greedy men can be calm when they think they are winning. He said the seal was almost open and that Pineville had already chosen its fate by hiding power from him for too long. He did not want to destroy the town for no reason. He wanted to claim what he believed was rightfully there. In his mind, the sleeping god was a tool, and the town was only a machine built to keep that tool hidden. Sharon, meanwhile, looked past him and toward the dark tunnel behind her, because she wanted the path that would lead her to the surface exit and then away from everything else. She had no grand plan, she only wanted to survive with the least pain and the most profit. Sarah saw that clearly, and for the first time she understood how Sharon's betrayal had happened. Sharon was not loyal to Victor. She was loyal to herself, and that made her easy for a man like Victor to use. Ben stepped forward and told Victor to stop, but Victor only smiled and raised a strange metal rod wrapped in silver wire, a tool stolen from the town hall vault and changed by old markings. He said the sleeping god was answering him already, and if Sarah wanted to live, she should step aside. Then the tunnel floor shivered, dust fell from the ceiling. A deep sound moved under their feet like a massive breath turning in sleep. Sarah felt fear, but she also felt something else, something new and steady. The town had lied to her by hiding its secret, but the truth was now in her hands, and she did not want power. She wanted to protect people. That difference mattered more than she had ever understood before. Before Victor could push farther, Emily rushed to the wall and pulled a hidden lever hidden inside one of the carved hands. A stone panel slid open, revealing a narrow chamber filled with old record boxes, cracked candles, and one long, folded banner with Pineville's oldest seal sewn into it. Emily had found the emergency archive room, a place the founders built for the day the underground warning would fail. On the banner was a message written in plain words, and Sarah read it aloud with shaking breath. The seal could not be forced open by strength alone because it answered only to consent, memory, and a final act of will. That was the twist hidden in the town's history. The sleeping god was not simply trapped by stone. The founders had bound it to a promise, and the promise had to be broken the right way, or the entire system would lash out and collapse. Victor stared at the banner, then at Sarah, and his face changed for the first time. He realized that raw power would not be enough and that someone had to speak the old release words while holding the seal steady through memory and intent. That meant the town was not just a lock, it was also a choice. Sharon cursed under her breath because this new truth ruined her easiest escape. Ben moved to Sarah's side and said they could still stop Victor if they reached the central chamber first. Sarah looked at the banner, then at the dark tunnel beyond, and she understood that her mother's stories had not been bedtime tales after all. They had been clues passed down to prepare someone like her for this night. She did not know yet who had trusted her with that burden, but she knew she could not run from it now. So she took the banner, handed the lantern to Ben, and told Emily to lead them deeper. Behind them, Victor began to laugh, not because he had won, but because he finally understood the size of the game. Ahead of them, the tunnel opened wider, and from the far dark came a low pulse of light, slow and alive, waiting for whatever came next. The tunnel widened into a long chamber where the air felt colder, and every step seemed to wake old dust from the stone floor. Sarah walked in front with the Pineville seal banner held tight against her chest, while Ben carried the lantern and kept one hand ready near her shoulder. Emily moved first because her sharp eyes could read the carved marks on the walls, and Sharon followed behind them with a tense face and a hand near her tools, looking like a woman who trusted no one, including herself. Victor stayed at the back for only a moment, and then his quiet laugh faded into the dark as he chose a different path, because he understood that this chamber was not a trap made to stop him. It was a test made to choose who was worthy. That thought made Sarah feel sick and angry at the same time, because she still did not know who had given her the banner, or why a hidden room under Pineville cared so much about her. But she did know one thing with absolute certainty. If Victor reached the heart of this place first, he would use it for himself, and whatever kept Pineville safe could be broken forever. Emily slowed beside a wall covered in narrow stone lines, and her blonde hair caught the lantern light as she traced the carvings with a shaking finger. She was a clerk before all of this, a woman who loved records, lists, dates, and honest facts, and that love had made her useful in the dark. She had followed the old town files farther than anyone else because she wanted to understand why certain roads ended in sealed halls and why some families had been ordered to forget entire streets. Now those records had brought her here, to a place where the walls carried the same warning shapes stitched into the banner. Emily swallowed hard and whispered that the marks were not random. They were directions, and they repeated in a pattern around the room, like a story written by someone who expected fear to erase memory. Ben, whose black hair was damp with sweat and whose strong body kept turning toward every sound, lifted the lantern higher so she could see more. He was the kind of man who protected first and asked questions later, and that made him steady in a place where the dark seemed to press in from every side. He asked what the marks meant, and Emily said they pointed to 3 doors, each one leading to a different part of the underground seal. One door would test what a person feared, one would test what a person wanted, and one would test what a person was willing to protect. Sarah looked down at the banner again, and the hidden writing beneath the faded thread seemed to burn in her hands because it matched the wall signs exactly. The warning was simple and terrible. The seal could not be opened by force, and anyone who tried would wake the thing trapped below it. Emily did not know what that thing was, only that the old council in Pineville had built the town above this place to keep it asleep. That was why people had been told to ignore the tunnels. That was why maps were burned. That was why the town had secrets in its bones. And that was why Victor mattered so much, because he did not care what was sleeping, only what power might be hidden inside it. The low pulse of light ahead grew stronger, and the chamber opened into a round hall with a cracked floor and tall stone arches. In the center stood a black pedestal with a ring of pale light floating above it, slow and steady, like a heartbeat that did not belong to any living body. Sarah stopped at the edge of the circle, and for a moment even Victor did not rush in because the light made everyone feel watched. Then Sharon stepped forward half a pace, her red hair dull under the lantern glow and her cold blue eyes narrowed with caution. She was a guard once, or nearly one, and the torn insignia on her coat showed that she had served aside before she chose her own survival. Sharon wanted the same thing most frightened people wanted, which was to make it through the night without becoming part of someone else's plan. She had followed Victor earlier because she thought he would take her out of Pineville and give her leverage in the chaos. But now she could see that his promise was only another chain. Sharon asked Sarah to tell her the truth about the banner, and Sarah, tired but honest, said she did not know the whole truth yet. She only knew the banner had been hidden carefully, passed down by someone who believed she would need it now, and that someone had trusted her enough to tie the town's future to her hands. Sharon stared at her for a long second, then looked away toward the light because she had just realized something that made her uneasy. The people who built this place did not leave it guarded by soldiers. They left it guarded by choice. That meant the real key was not strength, it was will.